Welcome to Frame of Reference, informed, intelligent conversations about the issues and challenges facing everyone in today's world. In-depth interviews to help you expand and inform your frame of reference. Now here's your host, Raul Labreche.
Well, welcome everyone to another edition of Frame of Reference, Profiles in Leadership. And tonight is an opportunity. This is one of the first times I've recorded later in the evening, here in Wisconsin at least. So with someone that's even later in the evening, because Tom, if I understand right, you're on Eastern Coast time, so it's something like 6:30 there, right? So I appreciate you joining me. I'm sure this should be a great time where you could be out having cocktails with friends or doing something much more fun than talking with me. So I appreciate that you're taking the time out to do this, Tom. It's great to meet you. But Tom Paladino is sitting across from me. He is an expert in scalar energy and a researcher in that in Florida. Scalar energy is a fundamental life force found everywhere in the world, space, and universe. It originates from the sun and stars, the chi, the prana, the om, mana, the life force, the pyramid energy, the 0-point energy are synchronous terms for scalar energy. And yet, here I am conducting this interview, beginning it, and I have to tell you, when I saw the word scalar, I thought, well, isn't that like the thing you get on top of and it tells you need to hit the weights again? So it was, it's interesting to find out that no, Raul, there is something more to the world than weight scales when you're talking scalar energy. So, Tom, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to meet you and to get to know you.
I appreciate your humor. Thank you for your audience. Thank you, sir.
Well, Tom, one of my New Year's resolutions, there you go. It's been so long since the New Year now, I've even forgotten what that is. But New Year's resolution is I'm going to stop trying to introduce my guests and instead let my guests introduce themselves. So if you're in an elevator and someone turns to you and says, Tom, who is Tom Paladino? What's your answer to that? Not that should happen in an elevator, but maybe it might. You never know, right? So be prepared.
You never know. So here it goes. I'm a researcher. I research the sun and the stars. And the energy that I've described as scalar energy is the energy that powers the sun and the stars. So I am, if you will, researching the primal force of the universe. Scalar energy, solar energy, call it what you will, life force energy. Why is that important? Well, all instructions, all energy originates from the sun and the stars. So I am going back in time to the cause, to the first principle of the universe. And that's important because it gives us greater understanding of the universe. If you can go back to the first cause, it gives you really a profound, intimate understanding of the universe. That's what I do for a living.
So you're researching the uncaused cause. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So
the uncaused cause. Thank you.
So
yes,
it's interesting too because back when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I don't know if you remember Alan Parsons at all. Did you ever listen to any Alan Parsons music? So his one music that he had one album, I think it was called Time Machine. And he had a piece there that began that album. And it was the first time that I ever had anyone talk about looking up into the stars, looking up into the heavens and gazing into that and what we know about the universe and what we can see just visually from the universe. He said, what you're really looking at is a time machine. And then, of course, the more I learned about the universe and about light and the amount of time it takes for light to get to us, when you're looking at something that's 4 million light years away, we have no idea what that looks like right now because the light we're seeing is from 4 million light years ago, right? So that was a really difficult kind of concept to get my head around, that when we look up at the star at night, we're looking up at history. We're looking at something that has, came long before us and will likely be going on long after us. So, but we can talk about that. Okay. That's another whole thing. That's probably a whole podcast unto itself right there. Right. So, Tom, I told you, I warned you, we try to start out with a little bit of my favorite things. So I'm going to ask you a favorite thing right away, which is, do you have a favorite star?
A favorite star? The sun.
That makes sense. And if the sun was listening, it would be upset if you didn't say it, right? If you said Sirius or something, your son would go, excuse me, but I'm right here, okay? Yeah.
What's most relevant? It's our sun, the solar system.
Here, it makes sense. So do you go by the name of Saul, or do you just call it the old sun? Do you have any...
I've anglicized it. We'll call it.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have a favorite constellation?
I really don't. I love them all. And that's I've never been asked that. I really don't. Okay. I think that there's just incredible intelligence in each constellation. And each one is unique, and each one is broadcasting unique information. That's a profound thought.
It really is. Yeah, we don't think of it that way either, do we? We just kind of, I think, when you talk about take some time to smell the flowers, I tend to think, take some time to gaze at the stars. So it's a wonderful way to realize just how much there is to not only the universe, but how much there is to the knowledge that we don't have, we don't possess yet. How about, do you have a favorite book or a favorite author?
The Bible. Okay. Why? It's truth.
In the beginning, there was light. So,
light made, and that's really the, if you will, the flatus that gave us the universe. What did it start with? Light. Why? You have to have energy to have a universe. Yeah. Energy serves as instructions. You need intelligence instructions to have a universe. So God, in his grand design and the master plan, decided that light was going to carry those instructions. This is crucial to understand the universe. That's why light is the first principle.
But isn't it interesting, too, when you think of today's technology with fiber optics, that we've been able to, communicate so much information through fibers conducting light. So there's a lot to be unpacked in that, isn't there? So
there is, and light is the perfect instruction. It's the perfect carrier wave. And eventually we're going to get away from physical accoutrements. We're going to get away from a physical infrastructure and you just have everything non-physical. That's my prediction.
That would be nice. So get rid of all those ugly wires that are always making things look so unpleasant. So how about, do you have a favorite poem?
I don't. I like the Psalms. I like the 150 Psalms in the Old Testament. And those are poetic to me.
Yeah.
I would say the Psalms.
Okay. They are, people point to my mother-in-law is at the later portions of her life, and she regularly now, when she's going to bed, quotes the 23rd Psalm, which has always been, one of her favorites. It's a lot of people's favorite Psalm, right? But it's been interesting that she remembers so much of it, but it's also indicative of how she's failing as she struggles with more and more parts of it as we go along. So, but such is life, right? So what about, do you have a favorite type of music that you like listening to?
Classical. The older I get, the more I get into classical music. I've slowed down. When I was a kid, I listened to pop, to rock, but that's changed now.
Sure. Any particular composer that you like?
Everybody. Anybody from Brahms to Mozart, to Beethoven, anybody.
So I have friends that are classical aficionados, I will call them, and they believe that it isn't classical unless it's 1900 or earlier. Are you one of those classical people?
I'm not. No, I don't credence to that. Why do I like classical music? Because so often they've incorporated the golden mean or the divine proportion in their music. Their music has great meaning because their music copies nature, or you could actually see the Fibonacci sequence or other mathematical formula in their composition. So when you copy nature, that's the highest form of art as far as I'm concerned.
It's interesting too. I've talked with people that grow a lot of, do a lot of gardening or, growing of plants in their backyards or whatnot. And they'll tell you pretty regularly that the type of music that they try to play when they're, out in the garden tending to things in the morning is either classical or jazz. And I thought that, that makes complete sense now, doesn't it? That plants would go, yeah, I'm grooving to that. Play some more Coltrane. I'm all over that. Or, play some Mozart because I like that funky Mozart, baby. Bring it. So, right.
I've read some reports where classical music, say, versus heavy metal in plants, performed much better and had a more robust life, if you will, under classical influence, classical music, as opposed to, say, hard rock or heavy metal.
Yeah.
So there must be something there. There must be, music is intelligence, and whatever you're projecting into the plants, they absorb, they incorporate that intelligence.
Yeah. Well, you think about it too, wasn't it? Most of the classical composers, the greats, were always trying to describe something of beauty. They were trying to describe something of an emotional component of life and the world around them. Whereas it strikes me that a lot of our contemporary, heavy rock, metal, killer metal, that a lot of that is really centered around the selfish experience of hatred, anger. I'm upset. I'm, counterculturing this stupid world that we live in. When you're channeling those kinds of things, I don't know how you could help but, basically be telecommunicating thanatos, death, pretty much in any way, shape, or form. So any plant worth its greenery is going to say, no, thank you. I'd rather wilt than listen to that any longer. So, but
it's so life negating. It doesn't make sense to me. I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it tells you a lot about our culture today, doesn't it? That we're finding people. There is that sort of forces of light versus forces of darkness that are constantly at one's throat, if you will. How about I'll wrap up with this one so we can get in, because there's a lot to talk about. But is there a favorite? And I don't quite know how to describe this. I've been working with this question for a while, but it comes down to: is there a favorite memory or a favorite experience that you've had that when you are looking to find a way to maybe find center again, or to just kind of calm down, or maybe it catches you unexpectedly and something reminds you of it, and it brings you back to a place where you're like, I need to remember this. I need to stay in this place more often. I need to, be a part of this, whatever it is. Sometimes it's, people say, when I smell, home baked bread, it just brings me back to, these wonderful memories, blah, blah, blah. Do you have something like that?
I've had great memories as a youngster. I had an idyllic childhood. So I frequently look back into my past and I say that really was a great way for me to learn, to become enculturated. And it always makes me smile. My past makes me smile. I'm very happy. So if I can look to my roots, that gives me a great deal of influence. That gives me a great deal of clarity. There's always a bright spot in life. I know there's difficulties in life, but concentrate on the positive. Concentrate on how you can improve yourself and improve this world. And I've got fond memories. Fond. And that always serves as my compass.
I'm going to go to my grave trying to get the message across, but I am so happy that I grew up with, my parents were quite a bit older when they had me. They were both in their 40s. Dad was late 40s, mom was mid 40s. And, so I grew up with parents that were, a lot of times people's grandparents' age, right? And they used to play a lot of, you name it, Glenn Miller, the big band era to, Eddie Arnold and classical music. And the closest thing to jazz was probably swing, but they played a lot of Bing Crosby. And one of his songs, when he talks about you got to accentuate the positive, decentuate the negative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. And I've always thought, that's a great song, not only because of the way Bing sang it, but apparently it comes from a gospel song of some that it actually started in the church, and he grabbed a hold of it and turned it into a song that you gotta accentuate the positive, and you just think, wow, that's if that isn't a life motto, I don't know what is. So, but
you're right.
Anyway, so Tom, let's talk about so scalar energy. Now you've talked about that a little bit. So scalar energy really is life force. I mean, if we were talking, Star Wars, I guess, in a contemporary commercialized framework, right? That the force is there in everything, works through everything. That it's what helps us to communicate, ultimately with God. Would be my perspective on it, and that when you think about the uncaused cause. Right. How did you come to it? I mean, were you studying Tesla and you thought, what is going on here? I need to know more about this. What was your beginning of the light bulb going off and going, I need to know more about light?
My aha moment was when I studied Tesla, and Tesla would always refer to God, and he described the universe from these points of light. He realized that there was this innate energy, this if you will, uncreated energy. He called it radiant energy. And he wanted to control the sun, the energy of the sun, the energy of the stars. So Tesla, the reason why he's such a great theorist and inventor, he copied nature. The great inventors copy nature. When you go against nature, you're going to fail. So what did Tesla do later in his life? He copied the stars. He started creating free energy instruments, which were stars, miniature stars. And they behaved like a miniature star or a miniature sun. And when I read about his work, I said, this is pure genius because he's been able to understand the secrets of nature and copy them.
So
that's the key.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about some of Tesla's experiments that he did. You know, his ideas of, I mean, we should have known he was onto something when he was talking about alternating current and, started to show how that was so much more, potential for human civilization to grow. And, Edison, who of course wanted direct current to be, the thing of the future, went around electrocuting horses just to prove that, this stuff was so dangerous. So you got to know that when there's somebody walking around, electrocuting dogs and horses to try to prove you wrong, that something is rotten in Denmark, right?
Yes.
And yet he fought against that all his life. I mean, thankfully, people like Westinghouse came to his rescue, right, and tried to support him. But his ideas, even today, seem crazy. I mean, the poor man died destitute in a hotel room in New York, right, with, one of his closest friends at the time was a pigeon. It's easy for people to make fun of that and say, well, obviously the man was crazy, right? How do you counter that? How do you, get people to say, yeah, you're just looking at that much of Tesla?
He was eccentric, but he wasn't crazy. What Tesla was, he understood the virtue of everything, even pigeons. He realized that they're very docile creatures, very intelligent. And he had a relationship with pigeons. That's true. That's accurate. So what do I see in Tesla? A man who was gifted by God, and he followed those gifts. Tesla had hundreds of inventions. We would not be here today. The world would look different without Nikola Tesla. Yeah. He gave us the modern day age. And whether people understand him or not, nonetheless, he's to be commended for what he's done. 200, 300, maybe 400 inventions. Many of them we've never seen. They've been confiscated by the United States government. So what is my point? We have to look at these people who've served to change our culture for the better. Tesla, in his effort, was a sea change for mankind. There's no other scientist who's contributed more to humankind than that of Nikola Tesla. We owe him so much gratitude. If we say that George Washington was the founding father of our country, notably the United States, I'd say that Nikola Tesla was the founding father of the modern day age. He gave us modern day technology.
So for people that aren't familiar with Tesla either, can you name some of the inventions? I don't want to be the one to sit there going, because you're the specialty. You're the guest today. You get to describe Tesla. What are some of the top things?
There was a confrontation between Tesla and Edison. Edison wanted DC electricity. Tesla said AC is much to be preferred. And today we only use AC in our homes and our offices. Why? It's economical. If we would have used DC, we would have had to have a power plant every half a mile or every mile. That's not tenable. So it's Tesla who not only gave us AC electricity, but it was relatively inexpensive and relatively safe. Later in his life, he started working with the phonograph. He believed in radar. He actually took an X-ray of himself, a self X-ray. He understood these concepts. Many of his accomplishments contributed to the radio. A lot of people say that it was Tesla who gave us the radio, not Marconi. Marconi, if you will, borrowed some of Tesla's ideas. So it was really Tesla and his foundational understanding of nature in which we could, if you have if you will, this offshoot of so many different inventions. He was the one who started us down this road of AC electricity. And therefrom, there are so many inventions, there's so much technology that resulted from his spinal effort, from his central nervous system, if you will.
Sure.
We owe him a gratitude. We can never repay him for his genius. I firmly believe he was inspired by God. His genius was just, it's unmatched. And many times Tesla would say that God showed him illumination. He actually could see an invention in his mind. Mm-hmm. He could actually see this, if you will, before him, an invention. He would not have to put it on paper, or he would not have to, if you will, go about some type of trial and error in his laboratory. So apparently God gave him this knowledge, this illumination, this what I would call an intellectual vision.
Sure.
Now that's quite specific. Very few people enjoy that gift. So if my contention is correct, that God gave him the wisdom, and I say so, then God had a high regard for his integrity as an individual.
Sure. God
would not give his wisdom to a person, a man of nefarious intent. So not only was Tesla a great scientist, he was a great humanitarian.
Yeah, you think about that too. He, from my recollection of he came from a common background. Wasn't he Slavic, if I remember right? So a very humble background. He was not, particularly, when he came to America, he had virtually nothing. And it was really kind of when you look at his, steps as he came into America, and then the trajectory of his career, he always knew that he had something very special to offer. And I think, that probably led people to think he's pretty eccentric. Who does this guy think he is? Well, in a lot of ways, he was kind of a prophet of the modern age. But, I think of things like, you've talked about the AC. We wouldn't have motors if it wasn't for his ability to design a motor, a three-phase motor that can actually generate the things that we, take for granted today. There would be no, Tesla car, which, thank you, Elon Musk, for at least giving Tesla the credit for, the capability you have there. But it's a fascinating thing when you think about, here's this man that came from nothing and literally was a prophet in so many ways that, we just take it for granted. We don't even understand it. I don't think most of the time.
No.
Go ahead.
Right. His work, if you will, was so forward thinking that his contemporaries could only copy him. Yeah. Nobody matched him. Nobody could come close to his genius. Yeah. So that's the sign of a true genius. He's ahead of the field. He's in a league of his own, and nobody, even to this day, has ever been able to copy his brilliance. No one.
Yeah. Well, they can't even understand it. I mean, wasn't one of his last experiments. The thing that actually kind of caused his financial ruin was this whole concept of wireless energy transmission. As I remember, there was quite a large transmitter that he tried to construct in, was it New Jersey? And of course, the developing utility businesses were not thrilled with that whole concept, because there was a infrastructure there that would have been undermined if that had been successful. But that theory, that capacity that he envisioned. People have been trying to show that it actually could work, and are indeed showing that it could work. And yet it's like, no. We have way too much invested in copper mining and the making of wire and the making now of fiber optics, right? How do you combat that, right?
That was a threat to the military-industrial complex 100 years ago, and to this day, his research is suppressed for that reason. You're absolutely right.
And I hope somehow that perhaps the internet will be a way to get around that our ability to be interconnected with one another, that these bits of information. But I remember the same, I think, sources you probably looked at of, when Tesla died, immediately there were sort of these mysterious people that appeared, apparently from the government, and just took boxes and boxes and boxes of information from his room that no one's ever seen again. So I would think, you would think that someone would recognize that there's a whole lot of money to be made from utilizing that information. But, then again, I guess they realize that, but if we'll make the initial, savings on this, but after that, then people won't need us anymore once they have their thing. It's like, well, just make replaceable parts for it then. I don't know. There's got to be revenue streams there. I don't get it. I don't get why there's this fear of something that has so much potential to change so many lives and and solve so many problems and help so many people. It's anti-God. It's totally anti-God.
Anti-life, and that's what we've seen. And frankly, it really is spearheaded by the international bankers who want to control the narrative, who want to control not only banking but commerce. So this is Tesla's nemesis in his day. Tesla wanted to give to the world free energy. Well, when it's free, it's no longer scarce.
Right.
You reduce the scarcity significantly. And how do you make money? Many times you make money off of scarcity, off of that. That's the model that many people economic model that many people are following. So what's the point? Again, my research is to help people. Tesla's humanitarian. I want to be a humanitarian like Tesla. We have to start solving problems. You said that. We have to look for solutions. We're not solving our problems. Year after year goes by. We have the same problem, but there's no solution. What do we need? A new technology. We need a new way of doing things. That's what we need.
I'm a big star, just science fiction in general. And when you talk about, 0 point energy, I think right away of like Stargate. Stargate Atlantis, they were all about, the ZPMs that they were trying to find because they were the power source for just about everything and anything. And it was, they were just small devices, but they could plug them in and they powered an entire city. And I thought, boy, I got to believe that if somebody imagined that it's possible. Because it's just like Star Trek. When I grew up in the 60s, Star Trek was, on TV. And, my dad used to say he loved watching Star Trek because it gave him hope that we would get there someday. And, there's just so little these days that gives people hope. We're fighting it against each other for, you're Republican, I'm Democrat, I like Biden, you like Trump. I mean, it's just so ridiculous because at the end of the day, there is no real force at work here besides the haves and the have-nots, the people that have the information or don't have the information, the people that have health and the ability to be healthy, and the people that are kept from things that would keep them healthy, the people that have, all kinds of money and the people that do not. So at what point do you think that we as a race or as a culture, as a world, can grab onto what Tesla was all about? I think foundationally was it's right here. It's right here up in the sky. It's right there. We just need to figure out how to work with it instead of working against it all the time.
I say that all the time. The number one problem in this world is we fight. We're always fighting. There's always contention. If we work together, if 8 billion people work together, no fighting, harmony, it would be paradise on earth. So we've tripped over ourselves. And that includes the scientific community in which we're fighting at one another. We're not helping one another. It's, if you will, the law of the jungle. If there's an invention that comes out that helps people, bring it out to market, or at least tell people about it. Let there be a free sharing of ideas, of technology. I've tried to share my technology. I've been stifled. I think my discoveries are incredible, frankly. I think that the lay people, if you will, the grassroots effort is the key. It's the internet. That's the key to my success, not academia.
Sure. It'd probably be the key to our survival as a species. Up there with ham radio. Ham radio. There's another good source of just, uncensored ability to share knowledge. So you gave me a wonderful list of questions and talking points. So, but let's talk a little bit about the difference between scalar energy and solar energy. Is there a foundational difference there that we need to be aware of or be thinking as we kind of unravel the framework here?
If we look at the solar panels that's wonderful. They're taking in solar energy, but it's being converted into DC electricity, if you will, which is an inferior type of energy. What Tesla later in his life was able to do was take that solar energy and absorb it, or if you will, conduct it into one of his towers. And it was still in its primary form, scalar energy. It had not stepped down to electromagnetic energy. So by tapping into scalar energy, he could light up a city. It was so efficient, and it was wireless. So here's the key. When you're working with scalar energy, it's free energy from the stars, and the infrastructure is free. It's wireless energy. There are no need for any satellites or cell phone towers or if you will, dishes, any type of satellite dish. Why? Everything is interconnected. It's the ether that connects this energy. So had we listened to Tesla, we would have had paradise by now. Everybody would have the means and access to free, clean energy, no carbon footprint. Okay, I know a lot of people are worried about the environment. All of this energy is non-physical. It cannot harm. It's not a frequency. It's not electromagnetic frequency. It's a different order. And there's no biological consequence. I've worked with these instruments behind me for 30 years. I feel better. It's not radiation. Radiation is impossible. There's no chemical, if you will, decomposition. It's a different order of energy. It's all non-physical intelligence. Now, the point is, had we listened to Tesla and followed his model, the world would be decidedly different today.
So it sounds, the thing that I have such a hard time getting my head around with Tesla is this concept of, I always think you have to convert scalar into something else in order for it to be useful. Scalar, there's photosynthesis, there's, the ability to, turn solar energy into DC, that somehow we don't have that capacity to take it as it is, use it as it is, and function alongside it as it is. And that I try to imagine, what does a world look like where there's a car fueled on scalar energy, or that where there is a machine that gathers food out of the harvest things that we need to eat on a grand scale enough that would feed hundreds and millions or whatever of people. It's hard for me to imagine, how are we going to figure that out to be able to take that energy that's there and just power things? Are we all Obi-Wan Kenobi and we just make it move and it moves? Do you think is that where we're heading?
That's a good point. We consume so many resources through our typical energy generation, and it's dangerous and it pollutes, as opposed to using scalar energy that's free. You don't consume resources. It's inexpensive. Obviously, it's from the sun and the stars. It's non-physical. It's intelligence. So there's no chemical. There's no carbon emission. So what's the point? This will solve most of our problems. And I could only say that this has been suppressed, and that the powers that be do not want this alternative energy, scalar energy, as opposed to coal and electrical and wind farms, etc. Why? Because this energy is free. You can't make money off of it. There's no scarcity.
So how does the translation occur? If once I'm able to recognize and utilize the scalar, energy form or energy source, how does that turn into, or does it need to turn into something that takes me down the road at 60 miles an hour?
Tesla, for instance, Tesla developed a scalar energy car, and he demonstrated that car in Buffalo, New York. And as the report goes, he took the engine out of a car. It was a Pierce Arrow. And he placed inside of it instead some type of scalar energy apparatus in which he could run around town, so to speak, with this wireless car engine, okay? A car engine that did not support itself by combustion. There was no, if you will, gasoline or electrical charge. He simply channeled the energy of the stars into his motor, and he was able to, if you will, achieve that kinetic energy through the stars. Now, imagine that invention in and of itself. You don't need a charging station. You just erect an antenna. The antenna captures the energy of the sun and the stars, and you're completely, if you will, unencumbered now. You do not have to rely upon any energy source, fossil fuels, etc.
Right.
It was accomplished. Tesla had such a vehicle. He developed such a vehicle. Have we seen it today? No, it's suppressed.
Man. So how do we get it back? I mean, I've read of other, similar kinds of devices that Tesla was able to envision and construct. Even the Tesla coil, which, people, think it's just for, cool science fiction movies, but it actually had a purpose. He was trying to demonstrate how that kind of, collected energy could be utilized. We just lost the ability to translate it, I guess, somewhere along the line. How do we get that back?
I use Tesla coils. These are Tesla coils behind me. How do we get this technology back? We have to revisit Tesla. Sadly, we have to reinvent his work. He accomplished it. And essentially, we just copy what he's done. In many ways, I've copied him. Okay, but you have to be very specific. And you cannot, when it comes to scalar, you cannot find yourself, if you will, ensconced in electromagnetic theory. Scalar is a different science. It's another branch of physics. You have to think in this other term of non-physical science. Scalar science is quite different.
It makes me think of spiritual energy. When we talk about life force, we're talking about the soul ultimately, right? And even if you accept, I've talked with people that don't believe in the afterlife, and I'm like, well, do you believe in science? And say, well, yeah, of course. I said, well, then you must be familiar with Einstein's theory that energy can't be either created or destroyed. So it has to either transform into another form, or it has to be, something has to happen. You can't create or destroy it. And they're like, well, okay. I'm like, well, then that means that the energy of our soul has to somehow persist.
Right.
It can't be destroyed. So what do you think that looks like? Well, I have no idea. Like, exactly. So, but at least you can't say it doesn't exist. So, which is...
This is what Tesla saw. He saw this conservation of energy. Now, I know a lot of people are worried about running out of fossil fuels. That's an argument we could have for years. Let's do away with fossil fuels. Okay, if Tesla could illuminate a light bulb that he would hold in his hand, I can illuminate a light bulb now with this instrument. This is what I'm speaking about, free energy.
Right.
Let's get away from oil, from propane. Let's get away from nuclear reactors. That is limited. We've limited ourselves.
Right. Well, even I'm excited to see these successes we're starting to have with fusion, because fusion is at the core of what our sun does all the time, and it's limitless. I sometimes wonder too if that isn't another just we're trying to suppress that and make it as ungodly expensive as possible to create it, and yet if the sun is able to do it like this, and the sun doesn't appear to be depleting its supply of hydrogen anytime soon. There should be a clue there, right, as to what we should be able to and need to do. But how do you describe its nature when you think about scalar and you're trying to get someone that is just thinking in terms of, to me, it's almost like thinking 2-dimensionally instead of 3-dimensionally, or maybe 4-dimensionally. Is there a simple way to kind of grab a hold of it?
If you come from a religious background, it's consciousness, or it's the intelligence of the universe. If you're a physicist and you use terms such as quantum physics or quantum energy, meaning it's essentially massless, if you will, antimatter or matter-free energy. So what are we getting at? We're getting to the point of intelligence, where intelligence will run the universe, and it does. What do I mean? Scalar energy is the intelligence of the stars. It's all non-physical. So the highest order is that of intelligence. It's not a chemical reaction. It's not the physical plane. Now imagine that. The universe operates through intelligence. What is that intelligence? It's scalar energy. So to somebody today in this modern day age, you might say it's the Holy Spirit or consciousness. Again, if you will, a scientist might call that quantum mechanics or quantum physics. Others might say that is, if you will, chi or prana. There are different expressions, but society, cultures throughout millennia have realized that there's something out there, this life force energy that gives expression to everything. They were right. God bless them. It's true. It's accurate. There is a universal intelligence, a universal logos. That's the key, people. We're at the top. We control nature with intelligence.
Boy, that would be a nice thing if our country could figure that out right now, because there is seems to me, an extremely concerted effort to keep people from thinking, to keep people from being intelligent, to try to suppress intelligence in every way, shape, or form, especially when it differs from what I think, right? Because that's kind of the be-all, end-all, argument to. It's the story of Lucifer, right? I want to have what that God guy has. I think I should have that. Well, therein goes the fall. Instead of just accepting God as God and enjoying God and saying, God, boy, you sure have got it together, God. So, why mess up a good thing? We've been doing that forever. How does... sorry, go ahead.
And I say to myself, the greatest example of intelligent design is nature that perpetuates itself. How is it that the sea is constantly churning? Why do we have tides? What gives us the four seasons? What is this mechanism? What is this intelligence that gives us life? Why do we have the species that can sustain themselves? What are the mechanisms in place that allow the galaxies to persist millennia on millennia? There has to be some grand design, some incredible infinite intelligence that guides the universe, from the smallest creature to the largest galaxy. That is scalar energy. It dictates everything. Nothing misses its mark. Scalar energy dictates everything. Now, if my theory is correct and we can control scalar energy, then we have if you will, a vantage point for everything in nature, whether it's the smallest creature or the galaxies. We now have, if you will, that our periscope has now finally been able to find the tool, the mechanism of the universe. It's scalar energy. It's the intelligence for everything.
It makes me think of a movie that I just watched not too long ago. I don't know if you remember from several years ago, maybe the late 90s, Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. So, and, I thought at first, it's kind of silly, blah, blah, blah. But I watched it, and that movie is all about the very end. It's all about the final journey that she's able to take through this machine that's been transmitted to them from, Vega, I think is the star system it comes from. And I thought, she finally, this scientist who has never been able to admit that there might be a God, is put through this divine experience, only to find out that, what is it? Matthew McConaughey challenges her at one time. She says, "Prove that there's a God," and he said, "Well, let me ask you this: did you love your father?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "Did he love you?" "Yeah." "Well, prove it." So. And she just kind of, he loved you though, right? Well, yeah, well, prove it. So, and I struggle with the idea that why do we in our brains have to make this so much more difficult than it is, which is, it's not like God and science are two different things. They're the same thing, looking at it from different directions. And we keep making a war between two things that are not at war. And I don't get it. I just don't get it.
They are an equivalence. Science and religion are an equivalence. What one perspective is through a scientific inquiry, another perspective is through faith, but you can arrive at the truth from both. So really, there are an equivalence. It's just your interpretation of the truth, whether it's from scientific inquiry or from faith. It doesn't matter. It's still the truth. Truth is reality. Reality is truth. And I think this is what we've seen in the past century. And I fault, in many ways, the communists for this, to dumb down society and to say, unless you can prove it in a laboratory, then it's not valid. Well, there's a lot of things we can't prove, sort of like, as you were saying, love. Can you prove love? No. Nobody, I can't measure love, but you know it's real, you know it's valid.
Right.
You know, maybe you can prove it through empirical analysis, but nonetheless, it's an abstract, but it is real.
Right.
I think this generation is much smarter than me, than the previous generations. I think we're starting to realize that love, consciousness is necessary. You have to have some type of intelligence, logos, some type of plasma out there that contributes to all of this activity.
Yeah, there's very much of a, I think where it breaks down for me is in that reductionist idea that, we keep reducing things to, well, love is just, a series of electrochemical things happening in the brain. It's, association of things that we're comfortable with, that make us feel safe. It's like, no, love is more than that. Love is something that unifies. Love is something I can't put my finger on. I can't define it exactly, but I know when it's there and I know when it's not. We have that sensitivity. It's just like, and the one that boggles my mind is when people say, evolutionists, which I have no doubt that I look around and see things evolving around me all the time. But to think that, it just all happened without an intelligent design to it, that just makes me go, are you even intelligent? Because I'm not really sure how you can come to that supposition that it just all happened, it's just sort of a random, pool of chemicals that, the right forces got involved and boom, there was life. So
you have to look at history, and many times it's been written by the winners. You and I know that.
Yeah. So is there, there's a question here. How does scalar energy allow Tom Paladino to enhance an energetic state by way of their photograph, which I'm not even sure I understand that question. So I looked at it and thought, well, I want to know the answer to that question because I don't even understand what it's asking.
So don't think in electromagnetic terms. Think in quantum, which is all intelligence. Now I'm going to hold up my photograph. There's an intelligence on my photograph. This printed piece of paper, nonetheless, has my energy field, my signatures on that photograph. This instrument will find that signature and will send information into that force field, into that photographic force field, to improve my health, my quantum health. So what am I getting at? My photograph is placed inside this instrument. In so doing, I teleport to this instrument. I mean that, that's right. I bilocate or I teleport. They've done that in Star Trek. You can be in two places at once. Is it possible? Yes. Even though this is my physical body, this is my non-physical signature. And there's two Toms now. The flesh, me, and my photograph, which is my energy copy, my quantum copy. That's right. I bilocate or I teleport by way of my photograph. Or people send me their photograph and they teleport to me. Yes. And we work with their energy field. And this instrument can do anything from balance chakras to administer nutrients. I have a method in which I can take a photograph of a vitamin and place it next to the photograph of the people. And the energy of riboflavin is downloaded or imparted into their force field. It's a new way of looking at reality. It's the non-physical side. It's the quantum side, in which we don't work with people, we work with force fields of people.
What did Einstein call it? Spooky energy at a distance? Is that am I remembering that right?
Spooky action at a distance.
Spooky, yeah.
Sadly, see, Einstein wasn't the thinker that Tesla was. Tesla realized that there's two energies. Einstein can never get his head around the fact that there's two energies. He was stuck on electromagnetic energy, which is fine, but there's two energies. You can't explain the universe just by one energy. Mm-hmm. And again, Tesla began with electromagnetic energy, AC electricity, and later in his life, he graduated to scalar energy. So this, and if I may, and I'm not throwing rocks at anybody, this is the stumbling block today in academia. There's two energies. You have to accept both. You only can explain the universe by two energies, scalar and electromagnetic.
Well, it's interesting to me. You were just talking about that there, we reach out into the universe and try to prove intelligent life by virtue of, are they responding to our radio, our electromagnetic frequencies? Are we able to, see signs of intelligent life? And I think, guys, what if we're not even on the same wavelength? How if we're sending out radio waves and expecting them to respond to us? What if that's like, me trying to communicate to you with Bumblebee, by just bzz, 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 and it may in fact be a totally legitimate form of communication, but you don't understand Bumblebee. You don't use Bumblebee anymore. So how are you going to communicate me? That has nothing to do with whether or not you're intelligent. It just has to do with you don't speak Bumblebee. So it strikes me that scalar is kind of the same thing in a way, if my crude analogy, that how can we even talk about something or expect to utilize something that we can't even begin to have a conversation about without somebody going, that's Lululand, folks, because it sounds crazy, right? In the contemporary framework, it sounds crazy. How do you get past that?
Yeah, that's an emotional roadblock. And unless you can think through this, you'll always have that emotional roadblock. I guess I could encourage people to read Tesla and look at his work in Colorado Springs and in Long Island, in which he had free energy towers. And he was able to harness the energy of the stars through these towers. So it's valid. These are scientific instruments that can control this energy. And if it's an instrument, then, well, you're working through the laws of nature, the laws of science. This is not my opinion. This is not hyperbole. It takes time. And I'll say this. You have to humble yourself because you have to start at an elementary level to learn this new science. This is a new science. Tesla had to start, and he had to, if you will, learn radiant energy. And he made his mistakes. We all make our mistakes. But you have to be humble and say, I'm going to start. This is a new branch of physics. And I realize it's different than that of electricity. And I'm willing to be humble and I'm willing to learn. And if you can do that, you'll be a great scientist.
Well, it strikes me that anyone that is a person of faith ought to be able to do that. Yes. I like to think of myself as being someone that realizes I don't have it all figured out. And it sure would be nice to start understanding it a little more, I guess, ultimately. So does scalar energy turn on the ability to form our own nutrients even? I see that as one of your questions as well.
Yes. Again, if I refer to this, by the way, I only use photographs when I use this instrument. I never use a chemical. This is non-physical. What do I mean? If I use this photograph of riboflavin, right, it has an energy field. It has a signature. And if I place that next to my photograph, the energy field of riboflavin is downloaded into me. It's an energy field. It's intelligence. So the intelligence of riboflavin goes into me, and I receive my nutrition through instructions, intelligence, not chemicals. There's two ways to receive nutrients: biochemically, or through food, or protein shake, or through energy, through scalar energy. This is how I receive my nutrients energetically. And by the way, this process is served to suppress my appetite.
Interesting. So it's actually a diet photograph, essentially, is what it comes down to. So
yeah. Many people on my program say that they no longer have these hunger pains because throughout the day, 24 hours a day, they're receiving nutrients. And when you receive nutrients, your body has that set point or has that trigger, and it says, well, I received all the nutrients I need energetically, okay? And we're not hungry, so people can miss a meal.
Tom, there's so much more we have to talk about. I hope we can get together again and talk more, because I am a believer that I do not know very much at all in this world, and I would like to know more. And you are on to something, obviously. You do not come across as a crackpot at all. You actually do come across, to me at least, as a prophet of someone that is just trying to figure out something that it's difficult to figure out, yes, because it forces us to think differently. But as someone that comes from the theater, I know it's all about learning to think differently, because every play is different and every day is different. And people that tell me I don't like surprises, I always look at it and think, what is wrong with you that you don't like surprises? But thank you so much for your time, Tom. My guest today has been Tom Paladino. He's a scalar energy researcher based in Florida. And the scalar energy is the fundamental life force found everywhere in the world. You can think of it as chi, as prana, mana, life force, pyramid energy, the force. You can think of it any way you want to, but it is all around us. And if you want to deny its existence, after talking with Tom, I have to tell you, you are denying coffee. So wake up and smell the coffee, because it is everywhere. Right, Tom?
Yes.
You agree with that? Is that okay?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Well spoken.
You've been listening to and watching, hopefully, Frame of Reference, Profiles in Leadership. And Tom, it's been my pleasure, truly. Thank you so much for your time. And I want to learn more about all those devices behind you, because I did see is there a website or whatnot, Tom, that we can point people to? They want to know more?
Scalarlight.com. SCALAR, scalarlight.com.
Okay. And it's at least sort of a primer, right, of how you can at least start the journey to understanding what this is and how it works.
By the way, I offer anybody in the world 15 days of free sessions. So if you take me up on it, you're going to email us your photograph.
Okay.
And I'll work with you for 15 days.
Okay.
Scalarlight.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you again. We'll figure something out if that's okay with you.
Please. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's do it again.
Okay.